Hey guys, it is time to stand up. And there's no way of doing that without having a clear and concise understanding of truth. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about defining truth, and grateful to be on the show today. My background is about 20 years in government, between federal service, the military, private contracting, and a little foray into running for Congress in the state of California. So I would like to share with you guys what I learned and some lessons that we picked up there. Looking forward to it.
Josiah O'Neil, welcome to It Is Time to Stand Up.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for your service to our country and all of the amazing things that you have done. And so I'm going to get into your bio here really quick. You are the founder of a nonprofit called Defining Truth. And the purpose of that is to fight America's culture war. You're a Christian, a speaker, you're a combat vet. Thank you so much for your service.
Yes,
You have done your time in law enforcement. Probably your most important job is that you're a husband and a father.
right.
We need good men leading in the world, but you are an author, and you're a former San Diego sheriff, and you have worked close to the border, right? You served with Pompeo, so you've got an amazing background. But we're going to talk about the new book that you wrote today, Defining Truth. So let's just jump right in. Like I said, thank you first of all, for your service. Thank you for standing for truth. I can't think of something more important than that today.
Agree.
So I think where I want to start this is, tell me about your nonprofit and what led you to start that.
Well, after we ran for Congress in California, I didn't get elected, by the way.
Okay. But I bet you learned a lot.
I learned a ton. And one of the things that we really discovered was a great lack of truth. And I say that sort of generally, the book, as you know, we get a lot deeper into that. But I found it astounding that there wasn't a logical premise or sort of foundation from which conservatives were arguing their point. And what I personally sort of realized was that we had forsaken the Christian Judaic values that gave us a lot of those conservative perspectives. So what we have is sort of America running on the fumes of the founders in the past.
That's right.
That were solidly based in God's worldview and that Christian ethic. And so I took a step back after running and realized, you know what, we really need to lay the foundation and equip people with solid reasoning and logic. It's the sort of first principle concept that Aristotle talked about. Which then they could take into battle with them. Because what I saw in the political realm was a lot of defense.
Yeah.
Politicians especially, but others who were grassroots activists were getting sort of trampled by the left's ideology and narrative, and they weren't really equipped. So we set out to build that structure in Defining Truth as an organization to teach, instruct, and equip people with what they needed, those tools to fight.
Yeah, so good, so good. So why is biblical truth important?
Well, we could talk about it obviously on a metaphysical level all around the world, but specifically in the United States, we are battling a culture war right now for our very existence.
That's right.
And it's kind of like this. It's kind of like if you had a big tower, right? This beautiful tower structure, and its foundation is there, but it's getting old and it's not being maintained. And now you have a group of people that says, you know what, let's get rid of this foundation, thinking that the tower itself will stay, right? It doesn't take a genius to realize that if you destroy the foundation of the tower, the whole thing is going to come crashing down. Culturally, spiritually, ideologically, that's what's happening in America right now. Our foundation is solidly based in biblical worldview, the Christian Judaic values, and we're destroying it.
Yeah, and absolute truth. So not what's true for you is true for you, or what's true for me is true for me, but there is absolute truth. And I think that God defines what that is. And our culture wants people to think that it's okay for you to believe whatever you want to believe, that we're our own little mini gods. Sure. And the Bible is really clear that leads to destruction, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you talk about truth, how do you define truth?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you said that, because we 100% believe in absolute truth, and we think that the universe itself reinforces that. It's just the only logical approach to reality and realism. Mm-hmm. You mentioned relativism, And that's the sort of, well, what's good for you is good for you, and what's good for me is good for me. But that quickly leads to pluralism, which is, well, everybody's right. And that's just nonsensical, right?
Right.
If I believe that I should be able to kill the unborn child before it's born and you don't, then we can't both be right. Logically, that's just nonsensical. Besides that, we have the universe itself that establishes absolute truths because we have natural laws.
Right.
And laws that are unbreakable. We see this in the sciences. We see it in almost every area of study one can find. So it's not too far of a leap to say that because we understand the laws of causation and cause and effect, that those same principles apply in the metaphysical and the philosophical side. And that's why we do adhere to it, because we believe that the Bible presents the best possible answer for those mysteries and those questions that we have.
That's right.
And that's the challenge, right? We want to engage people in that logical debate to say, look, here's your perspective on the world. You say you don't believe in absolute truth. Well, let's ask some questions. Why do you not believe in absolute truth? Because we believe that even nature itself, as the Bible tells us, reveals the nature of God, even his divine nature.
That's right.
So it's there to discover.
All creation is groaning and points to Jesus, right? What do you think are the most dangerous lies that are being perpetrated in our American culture today? I know there's a lot of them. We
Sure.
can talk about a lot of them, but what do you think are the most dangerous?
In one of the chapters in the book, I talked about the worship of self. And I think that is predominantly a major issue for us in America. And what I mean by that is human beings seem to not be able to escape the existence of a higher power. It always comes back, even throughout the age of rationalism where we denied it. You see now culturally where people are beginning to consider spirituality again, except for what we've done this time is we've replaced God with ourselves. And so we've said we ourselves are God. In the book, I went a little deeper into that, but that's a pervasive lie that has existed since the beginning of time.
I was going to say, I think I've heard this somewhere before.
Yeah.
Like Satan, he wanted to be God.
Absolutely.
Thought he was God. Tried to convince Jesus that he would give him the world.
Over and over and over again, we see that the father of lies has repeated that same narrative, right? And that's really the secular humanist mantra today, is that no one can tell you that you're wrong. So
Right.
everything else is someone else's fault, and you're the center of the universe. And you can see how that's so destructive to not only your personal relationships, but to society around you.
Absolutely. So pride comes before the fall. We've got, we're all taking selfies and social media, and that's what our kids are growing up with, and it's really destructive. So I love that you started there, because it does begin with us knowing truth, with us standing for truth, with us teaching truth to our children, and protecting them from the craziness in the world. So we're going to touch on some of the other topics that you cover in the book. So this is wide ranging, y'all. There's abortion, there is marriage, there is self-defense. How did you pick these? That's a wide range of topics. They're
Sure.
all they have like a one word, title, but how did you choose what was going to go in the book, and what are the most important ones to you?
So again, I mentioned that a lot of this came off of me just having run for Congress. So a lot of those issues are common issues that are debated in the political realm.
Right.
But a lot of them also affect the geopolitical realm, which would be, our political influence around the world and to the benefit of our country. So each topic seemed to be something that I was consistently encountering in politics that I didn't feel our representatives had a good defense for, an apologetic, we might say in Christianese. And so each one of those, I kind of took a step back and I said, well, as a believer, I've known, my stance on these issues for years. I was raised in it. I understand God's perspective on it. And also, being a huge fan of history, I understood America's perspective on those issues. So it bothered me to hear representatives of the people today sort of casting it off as culture war matters don't matter. It's a waste of time. We should, and my perspective is culture war is all that matters. It's what moves a nation. It's the ideology behind every movement this country makes. And it's very, very important that we remind people that there are reasons for what we believe. They're not just flippant, Yeah. So
That's right.
that's where the chapter heads came from.
Yeah, so I think we have to know what we believe and why we believe so that we can articulate what we
Absolutely.
believe, and we need to pass that down to the next generation. I'm curious, you're from Southern California, you're close to the border. I think you've even done some work there as well. How do you think what's happening at the border is going to impact our country? And I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick reminder. So I did begin in the military, and then I went back to the Middle East to serve as a private contractor. I did high threat diplomatic security stuff with the State Department. When I came back to the States is when I went into law enforcement. So I started in Los Angeles,
Okay.
and then I transferred down to a smaller city in Southern California. And then I transferred back to be a special agent at the State Department,
Okay.
eventually coming back to San Diego. So I've been in 4 different departments, much to my wife's dismay, I'm sure. But so I have this sort of well-rounded perspective on that issue, which is why I premise it with that.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect example of why the culture war matters so much, because everything you see happening that's affecting national security is coming from a philosophical viewpoint.
Right.
It's coming from the culture war.
Right.
So the cesspool that American universities has become is producing people who make bad decisions because their worldview is bad.
Right.
And so everything becomes fruit of the poisonous tree. If you have a crooked view on reality, you cannot make good decisions. As Christians, we call this discernment.
Right.
And the world doesn't have it. They have a lot of smart people, but not a lot of wise people. So the border specifically is a direct result of an ideology that says there should be no borders. We should have no national identity. There is no God, hence all evil and problems are only someone else's fault, whether it's the climate causing terrorism. You know, you hear the most ridiculous things.
Right.
And what you're seeing on the border is real world consequences of that mindset and ideology being taught in American colleges and universities. And now those people are in positions of government. It's this progressive Marxist position that seeks to really dismantle what the United States is. And it's horrifying what's happening.
It is. It is. And I'm so glad that you ended with that, because on this show in particular, we could talk all day. We could list all the problems that we have in the world.
Sure.
But what I want to do is I want to give people action steps. So what are some things that we can do to make a difference in the culture war today? Whether it is a mom at home, it's a dad in the office, like it can be general, it can be specific. But if you were to say, these are the things that I would encourage you to do to make a difference so that we don't lose our sovereign nation.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, everybody has a role to play. Everybody has something they can do. Those roles may vary. Maybe not everyone is called to be a media influencer or a TV personality or even run for office, but somebody's called to do each one of those things at some particular time.
That's right.
So I think it starts with equipping yourself first. You have to have a good understanding of logic to go out then and have these conversations. But that's where it starts. And honestly, that's where the left in this country is really good, because they have saturated every aspect of our culture with these debates.
Right.
If you notice, they're not afraid to talk about whatever it is, the trans hysteria,
It's all in your face
abortion,
now.
all in your face.
And it starts at a very young age. So they've
Absolutely.
indoctrinated the children, not just on the college level, but from the elementary all the way through.
Oh, it's terrible. So you're right. So what we need to do is care again, because by and large, most blue collar middle class families were happy to go to work, pay taxes, and come home on the weekend and spend time with your family. The left, you know, or you could say our opposition, the enemy's out there in the street parading and screaming and, you know, rioting, and they're making noise. And as we know, sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So what people need to do is they need to get engaged. And whether that's at a large federal level, I would encourage you made a really good point. Every parent should know what's going on with their school boards. That is huge. You should be attending the board meetings when possible. You should be, making your voice heard, because we live in a republic where we are afforded the opportunity to tell our leaders and choose our leaders.
I call them on the phone and say, this is how I feel about this issue. You need to do something about it. And just and kind and loving, and I don't berate them, but
Sure.
we have a voice and we need to use that voice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what else can we do?
Well, local elections are very important. That's one step to get involved. The personal and friend circle is very important as well. There's really no reason that we should walk away from a family reunion or a conversation with friends while allowing lies to spread.
Right.
So, and oftentimes what I found is lies are sometimes just the lack of truth. So, you'll hear a group of friends talking and saying something that is incorrect. And there can be that awkward, like, I don't want to step in and say anything. But oftentimes when I'm willing to jump in and say something, it changes the entire narrative, because a lot of times people are like, wow, I've never heard that before.
Right.
I hear the left chanting their ideology all the time, but I don't hear a voice reaffirming it.
Right.
That brings me to the fact that I don't hear that enough in churches either. And that's something that I really struggled with running for Congress, to see the mass amount of support for the left's and opposition's perspective. And yet we had enough churches that if churches alone showed up to vote in this country, we would radically change in 24 hours. We would win every single election, local and federal. But the fact is, they don't show up.
We just had an interview just a little while ago with Bunny Pounds of Christians Engaged, and she just wrote a book called Jesus and Politics, and that's exactly what that is her whole mission, this is the biblical worldview. Christians, exercise your power and get in the fight, because people are not showing up to the polls, and then they want to complain when things don't go their way. So we have to be involved. We can't just leave politics to the politicians.
And I just want to piggyback on that. It's really important to have a correct worldview. We keep saying that. And that's where the church comes in, because the church is supposedly the bearer of truth and light. And what happens is, you have a group of people going to church. They see issues going on in the culture and the world around them. And if the pastor's not clarifying that with biblical wisdom, then we're going to go to the world. They go to Instagram, they go to Facebook. Right. They hear a worldly answer, which is oftentimes missing that love part and that gentleness, right? Because the world reacts in anger. And we know the Bible's pretty clear. You could have all these amazing gifts and everything, have all knowledge and all mysteries, but if you have not love, you're just a clanging cymbal or a resounding gong. That's right. You're noise. It's irritating. Right. So that's where the church can really step in to clarify for people, hey, this is how we lovingly share the truth with people. And it's a civic responsibility, because God has afforded us the liberty to do that. And we shouldn't take that for granted while Christians in North Korea are being persecuted.
That's right. You're speaking my love language, literally. It is truth and it is love. It is not one devoid the other. And we have to love people, but we can't shy away from biblical truth. So we have to do both of those. So as we're starting to wrap up now, what would be just some final wisdom that you would like to share with our viewers today?
Well, I'd like to say something specifically to young couples with kids, that now is the time to sort of ante up and kick in, to grow up, because this is your children and this is their future. And there's no one coming to help you.
That's right.
You have to care. So I would start with a little maturing and get interested in what's going on around you. And start educating yourself. Read correct information, intake that logical apologetic that you need to go out and defend truth. And I think as believers, we're called to do that. We're called to study to show ourselves approved, right, as the Bible says. And really, the world wants to separate politics from Christianity, but let me tell you, politics is just a set of ideologies for people struggling for power. Right. So the left is just as religious as any Christian that ever existed.
They can even be a little more religious because they're so vocal about some of their policies.
And a lot of these issues are not political issues. They're God's issues. They're moral issues. So as a believer, if you prepare yourself and study the Word of God, you will have a clear answer for what's going on in the world around you, because the Word of God is applicable for all of that.
That's right. So. I love what my pastor said. He goes, I'm never going to tell you, we're not going to get into a debate about if Tucker Carlson is kicked off the network or Don Lemon. He goes, that to me does not matter. But if it is in the Word of God, then I have the obligation to speak truth. So does the Bible talk about one man and one woman and life and gender issues and made in the image of God, all of these different things, those are the things that the church has got to become more vocal about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Yeah. Thank you for your book. Excited to support you in the work that you're doing. So tell everybody again, defining truth.
Yep. The book is out. You can get it at definingtruth.org. That's our website. We actually have a digital version if you read on Kindle. We have the paperback, which I kind of like still. And we just came out with an audio version. We had a voice actor that read it. Sounds awesome. And that's
great.
cool because you can drive around in the car and listen to it and whatnot. And our podcast is available, everywhere you get your podcasts as well. Defining Truth Podcast.
I love that. I love that so much. And actually, yeah, I got to read the book. I've been reading it aloud. And so, parents, if you've got, children old enough to sit and listen to you read, we've had the best time sitting around our fire pit in the evening reading, and then it opens up discussion. And I think that's what's really important, and a lot of what is missing is dialoguing about these very important issues. So
Absolutely.
thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much.